Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today with our sponsor Lorelei White, we are going to do something that surprisingly I have not tried yet. Today we are going to do some low immersion dyeing of wool yarn with these RIT liquid dyes. Now over the last year or so I've played with these dyes a number of times. Mostly using them for hand painting, occasionally for some kettle dyed techniques. And I did very early on try using this to do some low immersion on some roving. But I still have not tried doing a low immersion technique with this with yarn. And I feel like over the last year I've learned a lot about this dye and how less is more. If you look at the instructions on the bottle, you think that you need a lot more dye than you really need. It is possible to get this dye to exhaust on wool. You just need to make sure that you don't use way too much dye. There's still a chance that whatever we do could have a lot of rinsing, but I think that I have at least some idea on where to start with, so that way maybe we can create something where we see some of these original colors behind on our yarn. Today we are going to dye 200 grams of Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn. This yarn is 100% Peruvian highland wool, and there is an affiliate link in the video description. Right now I am pre-soaking this yarn in some plain tap water for a little over half an hour. Today we are going to use purple, teal, and fuchsia. And I am going to dilute these dyes in some water so that way we can have a little more volume to work with as we are playing with our low immersion technique. I am going to add 1 tablespoon of each of these dyes to these squeeze bottles. The dilution is 1 tablespoon of dye in about half a cup of water. So that's about 15 milliliters of dye going into around 120 milliliters of water. And I'm going to go ahead and do the other two. The nice thing about these 3 colors is that even if they mix and blend together, I think that they will still look really pretty. I learned in the ChemKnits Hanukkah special that the fuchsia and teal mixed into a purple. So if things spread out too much, we could end up with all over purple yarn. But let's go see what we can create. Everything we are using today is dedicated dye equipment. I squeezed out some of the water, but since we're about to add a lot more water back in, I didn't need it to be too wrung out. This is a steam pan that I love to use for these low immersion techniques. It's deep enough that I can have as much water as I want in it, but also like wide enough that I can spread things out and have it over 2 burners on my stovetop. I added 6 cups of water so far, which is enough that if I pat the fiber down to have some of the fiber be outside of the water, but it's not full immersion because the water is half out of the surface, but we should be able to heat things up and I think it'll work nicely. Now, in order for these RIT dyes to bind to our 100% wool yarn, we need to use some white vinegar. And I'm going to go ahead and add 1, 2, 3, 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. This is a little higher than what I do sometimes. A lot of times in this amount of water I might do 1 to 2 tablespoons, but I want it to be acidic enough for these RIT colors to strike. I am curious to see if we will be able to see separation from these colors, or if they're going to spread out and blend and we're going to see something a little more watercolory. We won't know until we give it a shot. But one thing that will help prevent the colors from spreading out too much is the fact that we have a really low level of water. If the water level was higher, the dye could go a little bit beneath the yarn and sort of travel through, and this is going to sort of keep things in their areas a little more. Now, when I add the dye, I could just do it in segments, but I'm going to sort of add the dye all over the place. And yeah, we're going to see what we get. But first, we need to make sure we heat it up. So I just turned on the burners and we're going to wait till we start seeing some bubbles. Okay, we've got some bubbles coming. And you can sort of move the heat around a little bit by shaking the pan. But good, these middle sections are warm as well. And now we can start adding some dye. When doing a little immersion, you want to take care to keep an eye on your pans because you do not want to run out of water and burn your yarn. All right, let's start with the teal. Shake up my little bottle and yeah, oh, that's pretty. I am so curious if this is going to stay, if this is going to spread out. Now, I'm just going to start with a little bit and we can keep adding more and more and more as needed, but I sort of want to see what it will do first. And now let's take the pink. And the purple. I had thought about doing the purple down this way, but the reason why I'm sort of going across more than up and down is just that I know that the I would like the repeats to be on the shorter side versus the longer side, but I'm reducing the heat to low. Let's go ahead and give this, let's give this 5 minutes and we'll see how much stuff has spread and then think about adding more color to our yarn. 5 minutes have passed and some color has spread out, but a lot of it is staying where I put it. And that is cool. Let's take a closer look and see. Oh yeah. Oh, this is good. Okay, there's a little color in there, but that color is absorbing. Oh yeah, this is great. All right, let's start having some fun here. Let's zigzag these colors on. We will need to flip it at some point, but for now, let's just start layering. I mean, clearly I'm already layering. I would have been less nervous about the colors striking versus spreading if this were superwash yarn. In general, dye strikes a lot faster to superwash than non-superwash yarn. So that was one reason why I was keeping, sort of like holding my breath a little bit here, but this is awesome. This is so awesome and so pretty. All right, I might add more color on the side before I flip it. We still don't know how deep this is penetrating. And I think we've only used maybe a tablespoon of our mixtures so far. We really have not used a lot of color. And we've got some really good deep tones in here. Granted, they will absolutely lighten as we, they will lighten as the yarn dries, but, oh, this is beautiful. I know I said I was going to wait, but there's some areas where I wanted a little more color already. All right, let's give this another 5 minutes and then we'll come back. Lorelei, this is gonna be an awesome unicorn yarn. You can't see it, but I'm dancing over here because I am just so excited. right, let's flip the yarn. There's gonna be some color. Whoa, a lot of color. Ooh, a lot more color on the other side than I thought. Woohoo! But we still see all of these rainbowy tones. Ooh. Ooh. Awesome. This has like a little better penetration than I expected. But oh my gosh, I am absolutely loving this. All right, so versus zigzags, I want to do, I think, some controlled, well, did I not flip it completely? We might move it one more time. I know this is 100% wool yarn, but this amount of moving isn't gonna hurt it too much. Well, I am going zigzag. Giving us a lot of turquoise. Oh, this is beautiful. Now, I am dyeing 2 skeins of yarn at the same time, and they will have a lot of similarities in tone, in the overall colors, but you know, they are technically the same dye lot. I am dyeing them at the same time, but there will be differences. And so if Lorelai, if you're going to work them together, I would recommend, depending on the kind of project, maybe alternating every couple of rows, so that way there's not like a noticeable difference when switching between one and the other. But I think stuff overall is so random that it might not be a huge issue. I don't mind if there is a little bit of white left, but I am just sort of trying to, you know, add color where I think that it could be needed. But ooh, this is awesome. And I haven't even used close to half of the dye that I mixed. So now we're gonna let this sit for another 5 minutes and then decide if we need to move things around or what. But oh my gosh, this is awesome. One thing you could definitely do is, if you're worried about your water level, is you could cover this with tin foil, but these colors are clearing great. There's a little color in some of these side areas, but ultimately this is just absolutely stunning. I am going ahead and shifting the yarn again because I want to see if I feel like we're missing anything. But clearly, okay, maybe, oh, it's pretty good. I might add a tiny bit more, especially sort of like by these ends where the ties are, but this is looking great. I think one of the big mistakes that you could make with these liquid dyes is just using too much dye. And I am definitely guilty of that. But you can see that we are exhausting this water here. Like, these colors are exhausting. And we've got something beautiful, beautiful here. Yeah. Like, we've got this beautiful layered, stunning colorway. And, oh, if anything, I think that you guys were a little overexposed this whole time, but I am just absolutely thrilled. And I know that this is going to knit up non-pooling, a little random, really fun. So at this stage, I think we're going to let this go for a final 5 minutes, and then we're going to turn off the heat. Oh, this is so pretty. Okay, there's still, I think, maybe not actually. I was going to say there's still a tiny bit, yeah, there's maybe a tiny bit of dye around some of these edges, but I'm going to turn off the heat, and I'm going to go ahead and leave the yarn in here. So that way it has a little more heat. If there is a little excess dye, maybe it'll absorb now, which will make our washing later easier. But when it cools off, then we'll wash the yarn. One of the reasons that I am so excited is that these RIT liquid dyes are really easy for people to find. A lot of like big box craft stores, Michael's, Joann's, AC Moore, carry this line. And it can be harder for people to find acid dyes in person. So being able to get some of the colors to strike really, really fast with a dye that is so accessible to a lot of people already, I think it's great. And honestly, I know that when I was nervous about acid dye powders, one of the first commercial dyes I went into, I guess besides tie-dye, but one of the first commercial dyes I started playing with was these RIT liquid dyes because I liked that they were pre-mixed. It felt a little less intimidating to me than dealing with the acid dye powders. The yarn is not yet completely cool, but this dye bath has cleared. And I'm going to drain out some of this water and set it aside. Let's wash our yarn. If you do tangle your yarn at all, try to wait until it's dry to untangle. We are seeing a little bit of bleeding, but all things considered, that is not bad. Not like if you go back to my very first dyeing yarn with RIT videos. If the bleeding persists for too long, you can always add more vinegar and steam it or something again, but I have a feeling that this won't be too bad. I have added some dish soap. I find sometimes that helps us get rid of residual dye. Another thing that you could do, honestly, is use what I like to call sometimes a yarn mop and toss a skein of superwash yarn in with this rinse water. And that can help soak up some of this residual color. So when I'm doing these videos, I wash the yarn in this little basin so that way I can change the water quickly and you can see how much bleeding there is or isn't in our yarn. But I think that it can be beneficial to have a larger volume of water at a time that you are rinsing with. And I do want to say this is 100% wool yarn. This is not a superwash yarn, so you do want to be careful to not felt it. But anyway, I'm going to keep rinsing this until the water runs clear, and then we will hang it up to dry. Lorelei White, here is your finished dry yarn. We have these beautiful patches of pink, purple, and teal on what almost looks like a gray backdrop. Maybe because of the way that the colors mixed as they spread a little bit, but there's maybe a few hints of the original white. But overall, we did get really, really good coverage of our colors while keeping the three colors fairly distinct from one another. The colors themselves feel a little more muted now that it's dry, and I think that I could have mixed my squeeze bottles a little more concentrated. Maybe added a little less than a half a cup of water and used 2 tablespoons of the dyes. I also could have used more dye as I was squeezing onto the yarn. I was trying to use a really light hand because I didn't want to end up with one color. I wanted to be able to see these flecks and changes of color in the yarn. When you have 100% non-superwash wool and superwash wool in the same pot, the superwash wool is going to absorb a lot more color. But that doesn't mean that you can't get intense, vibrant colors on 100% wool yarn. And again, I think the fault here is not that we didn't absorb the color as well, but that I just did not use enough color to begin with. I think that these 2 skeins of yarn will work really, really nicely together and play off of one another in a project, and it'll be non-pooling, non-repeating, and a whole lot of fun. Of the 3 colors, we see the smallest sections of the fuchsia, and it looks like the purple and the turquoise, the teal spread out a bit more. making those colors a little softer overall. Lorelei White, thank you for sponsoring this episode of Dyepot Weekly. And to the viewers at home, if you're interested in becoming a sponsor, check out the link in the video description and iCard. There's all the details you need in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy store. But as a sponsor, you'll get multiple shout outs in the episode itself, plus 1 to 200 grams of yarn that I dye in your episode. And I really have so much fun designing experiments and videos with my sponsors in mind. So you should go check it out. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.